Paul, Romans, and the Sabbath. Certain portions of Scripture may appear contradictory. When Bible students discover this, they often assume the Bible is untrustworthy. They reject the Bible rather than studying to resolve the conflict. Every student of Scripture should remember, truth is harmonious. Truth never contradicts itself. When one Bible text appears to conflict with another, it is heaven's invitation for more study. All facts and principles related to the subject must be brought together. The correct understanding is always found when the conclusion does not conflict or contradict the weight of evidence. As truth is never contradictory, further study will always resolve conflicting ideas. One passage that has confused many people is found in Romans chapter 14, verses 5 and 6. One person esteems one day above another, another esteems every day alike. Let each be fully convinced in his own mind. He who observes the day observes it to Yahua, and he who does not observe the day to Yahua, he does not observe it. He who eats, eats to Yahua, for he gives Yahua thanks, and he who does not eat to Yahua, he does not eat and gives Yahua thanks. The phrase, "let each be fully convinced in his own mind," is often used to prove all are free to choose on which day, if any, they worship the Creator. People claiming to worship every day also use Romans 14 as their biblical support for not observing a specific Sabbath day of worship. This belief is based on the assumption Paul is speaking of Sabbaths and feast days in the quoted passage. The error of this idea is found with a careful study of the context together with the rest of Paul's writings. Paul always kept the feasts and the seventh-day Sabbath and taught his converts to do the same. Paul never taught the divine law was no longer binding. Earlier in Romans, Paul had confessed, "The law is holy, and the commandment holy, and just, and good." Paul always balanced righteousness by faith with recognition that the divine law is still binding and must be kept. What then? Shall we sin because we are not under the law, but under grace? Yahuwah forbid. The context of Romans 14, 5 and 6 clarifies what Paul meant about esteeming all days alike. He was referring to pagan practices. Romans 14 opens with Paul instructing the Roman believers to support new converts who were weak in the faith and not engage in discussions on points that would shake their newfound beliefs. Receive one who is weak in the faith, but not to disputes over doubtful things. For one believes he may eat all things, but he who is weak eats only vegetables. Let not him who eats despise him who does not eat, and let not him who does not eat judge him who eats. For Yahuwah has received him. Who are you to judge another's servant? One person esteems one day above another, another esteems every day alike. Let each be fully convinced in his own mind. He who observes the day observes it to Yahuwah, and he who does not observe the day to Yahuwah, he does not observe it. He who eats, eats to Yahuwah, for he gives Yahuwah thanks, and he who does not eat to Yahuwah, he does not eat and gives Yahuwah thanks. The new converts had come out of paganism. There was a tendency among such to still fear the power of their old idols. Many were still influenced by old superstitions. Because most of the meat in the city had been offered to idols, many of the new converts abstained from eating meat, choosing to eat only fruits, grains, and vegetables instead. Paul knew well that the idol's power came from demons, and Yahweh's power was stronger. Paul had no problem eating meat offered to idols because he knew idols weren't no gods at all. Idols and the food sacrificed to them were not an issue to Paul, since he had not been a participant in the ceremony of dedication. Paul was a faith warrior as well as a tender shepherd of the flock. Because his faith was not shaken by eating food offered to idols, he knew others did not have his understanding. However, there is not in every one that knowledge, for some with consciousness of the idol until now eat it as a thing offered to an idol, and their conscience being weak is defiled. But food does not commend us to Yahuwah, for neither if we eat are we the better, nor if we do not eat are we the worse. Paul determined never to do anything that would weaken the faith of another. He continued in his instruction, "But beware lest somehow this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to those who are weak. If anyone sees you who have knowledge eating in an idol's temple, will not the conscience of him who is weak be emboldened to eat those things offered to idols? And because of your knowledge shall the weak brother perish, for whom Yahushua died? But when you thus sin against the brethren, and wound their weak conscience, you sin against Yahushua. Therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never again eat meat, lest I make my brother stumble." Some of the new converts in Rome were esteeming one day above another as a continuation of the old pagan beliefs. The pagans often went on partial fasts, abstaining from certain foods on particular days. This is similar to Roman Catholics eating fish, but not other meats on Friday, now mostly a thing of the past. Not only were some new converts afraid to eat food sacrificed to idols, but others were still observing the gods' various fast days. Others regarded all days alike, giving no particular respect by fasting to one day or another. This was the issue Paul addressed in Romans 14. He was not referring to seventh-day Sabbaths or annual feast days at all. The phrase, "Let each be fully convinced in his own mind," Romans 14:5, has been misunderstood by many people. These teachings concerning pagan gods and their fast days do not give permission to anyone to break the divine law and choose their own day of worship. Instead, in context, Paul is saying each one needs to be individually convicted of what is right, so he can obey the law. The phrase "fully convinced" or "fully persuaded" comes from pleirophoreo. This Greek word means to carry out fully in evidence, that is, completely assure or convince, entirely accomplish, to bring in full measure, to fulfill. In Romans 14:5, it is said of the apprehension, understanding, of the will of Yahua. Paul never claimed the law should not be kept. Rather, he is telling the Romans each should diligently seek a full understanding of the will of Yahuah. If the Romans truly were fully persuaded, each in his own mind, there would not have been problems with some of the new converts still fearing pagan superstitions or observing pagan fast days. Paul's admonishment was, all should protect these babes in the faith and not become stumbling blocks to them. In turn, those who were young in the faith had the responsibility to study the law and the will of Yahuah so they could each understand the divine will and live in harmony with it. Yahuah is concerned with the smallest particulars of our lives. However, he wants us to understand we are not saved by works of either eating or fasting. His concern is the motive of the heart, which prompts the action. Paul understood only service done by love would be accepted by Yahuah. He admonished the Roman believers to stop judging one another based on works, fasting or not fasting. But why do you judge your brother? Or why do you show contempt for your brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Christ. For it is written, As I live, says Yahuah, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall confess to Yahuah. So then, each of us shall give account of himself to Yahuah. The full thrust of Paul's message was obedience to the law through faith because of love for the Father. Paul cautioned the Romans against judging others because we ourselves will also be judged by Yahuah. Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. Paul's message to the Romans is as applicable today as when it was written. Let everyone protect those young in the faith, neither judging others nor being a stumbling block to them. Let everyone commit to know, to study, and understand Yahuah's will and live his life in harmony with that will. May all believers keep the divine law because we love the lawgiver.